You know, there's this idea that the resilience of a nation, well, it's often found not in the grand pronouncements, but more in the quiet perseverance of its people and in the webs of support that bind communities together.
That really hits the nail on the head for what we're discussing today, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, because imagine this. You're in Batkin, a town in southern Kyrgyzstan, and there's this teacher, Nur Akhmatov, watching a library, a conference hall, even a women's sports center being built.
Okay, so local development projects.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. This construction, it's largely funded by Kyrgyz emigrants, people sending money home from thousands of miles away in Russia.
Wow. So it's not government funding, primarily.
Not primarily, no. And that's not just some interesting local story. It's really a snapshot, a living example of how vital emigrant labor has become for whole economies right across Central Asia.
Right. A sort of lifeline.
Precisely. And that's what we're diving into today. We've been going through a really critical report on migrant remittances in Central Asia. Our mission, it's to help you, our listener, really unpack the staggering scale of these money flows.
And not just the scale, but the tangible impact, too,
Yeah.
right? How it actually affects things on the ground.
Yes, the impact on local development, which can be quite surprising, and also to get a grasp of the complex sort of shifting dynamics that are influencing migration patterns right now in this really vital region.
And what's so compelling, I think, is how these almost invisible economic engines aren't just propping up families. They're literally reshaping societies from the ground up. This deep dive, it offers some crucial insights. You know, for anyone interested in socioeconomic development, global migration patterns, geopolitical influences, it touches on all of that.
And we should mention, for those of you preparing for exams like the UPSC, this is incredibly relevant stuff.
Oh, definitely. For mains, think economy, social issues, international relations. Even for prelims, understanding these dynamics is key.
And for everyone else, it's about understanding this quiet revolution, communities being built, brick by brick, often far away from the big headline.
A story of resilience, really.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's unpack this scale, this invisible economic engine. Let's circle back to Nur Akhmatov in Bakin. He mentioned that even when he was working in Moscow, far away, he was sending back 300 Kyrgyz some a month.
Which is about, what, $3 US?
Yeah, roughly $3 a month. Now, that might not sound like a huge amount on its own, but what does that actually mean for him, for the project?
Well, that's a great point because it highlights the human side, doesn't it? That 300 some for Nur wasn't just spare cash. It was a real sacrifice from probably a fairly modest Moscow salary.
Right.
It shows his profound personal commitment. But then you multiply that. Nur mentioned that something like 1,500 migrants collectively chipped in to build a whole new school in Bakin.
1,500 people, coordinated from afar.
Yeah, imagine the coordination. Just think about that.
Yeah.
And when you put it against the context,
Right.
what's the average salary in Bakin?
It's low. The report said around $235 a month.
Exactly. So
Wow.
these funds coming from outside, they're not just a top-up. They're absolutely fundamental. It's not just a donation. It's like foundational investment.
It really underscores the community aspect.
Totally. It's this powerful, community-driven development model happening almost organically. And you see the pride it generates. Take the teacher Abazbek Abdenabiev with the new sports center.
Ah, yes, the transformation story.
Right. He talked about kids playing in the dust before, games stopped by wind or rain. Now they have this bright blue and yellow indoor court, a complete game changer.
You can almost picture it.
And he really emphasized, he used the word enormous, the contribution of migrants. Even though they're far away, they're ensuring opportunities, real chances for their kids, their siblings, right there at home.
It's foresight, isn't it? Building for the future.
It absolutely is. Shifting from just survival to actual progress, creating opportunity.
That visible progress is so powerful. But let's zoom out again just to get our heads around the sheer volume of money. The World Bank figures are, well, they're quite something.
They really are. Record remittances last year.
So for Kyrgyzstan, we're talking $3 billion. That accounted for about 25% of their entire GDP, a quarter, an all-time high.
A quarter of the whole economy driven by people sending money home. And if you think that's high,
Go on.
Tajikistan. It received an incredible $6 billion last year. That makes up almost half its GDP.
Wait, half, 50%.
Almost 50%. Just think about that dependency. It's actually the highest level of reliance on remittances anywhere in the world.
That's just staggering. And Uzbekistan, The most populous nation in the region.
Also huge numbers. $14.8 billion flowed in. That's about 14% of its GDP. Still a massive chunk.
These aren't just abstract figures, are they? They have a direct link to people's lives, especially poverty.
Absolutely direct. The Kyrgyz government, for instance, estimates that without these remittances, their national poverty rate wouldn't be 29%.
Which is already quite high.
Right. It would surge to 31%. That's a huge leap. Millions more people pushed into hardship without this external support.
So it's a critical safety net preventing a much deeper crisis.
Definitely. Which then raises the question about the government's role, doesn't it? If the impact is so huge, what are they doing? Well, we see that governments, often because they simply can't fund these big projects themselves, they actively encourage these contributions.
Like that banner you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. In Mirabad, northern Tajikistan, this big government banner right over the road, beautifying the country is the duty of every citizen. A pretty clear message.
It's very direct. But is it just banners? Or are there other ways they facilitate this? Does it kind of reveal limitations in their own budgets?
It certainly hints at fiscal constraints.
Yeah.
And it's not really a top-down planned thing. It feels much more organic, community-led, like Abdukakir Mashidov in Tajikistan.
The local fundraiser.
Right. He's just a villager. But he handles the fundraising for street repairs, a new school, a bridge. He literally said, as soon as one street is repaired, we move on to the next. It's this continuous cycle.
Driven by immediate needs, managed locally. That speaks volumes about trust within the community, doesn't it?
Absolutely. He's not some government official. He's earned that trust. It's like grassroots governance, grassroots development happening right there.
It's really fascinating.
And there's another layer here, sort of an economic quirk almost. The recent slip in the value of local currencies, like the som or the somoni, against the Russian ruble.
Okay. How does that play in?
Well, it's actually pushed up the spending power of the remittances. The money sent home buys more locally.
Ah, that's interesting. So a weaker local currency makes the rubles sent home go further. Can you unpack that a bit? How does that work on the ground for a family?
Sure. So think about it. A migrant sends, say, 10,000 rubles home. If the local currency weakens against the ruble, when that 10,000 rubles gets exchanged,
It turns into more somom or somoni.
exactly, maybe 10% more, maybe even 20% more than it would have a few months before. For a family receiving that money, suddenly it stretches further.
So it could mean extra groceries, maybe school supplies.
Precisely. Or covering a small medical bill they couldn't afford before. It's a very real, immediate boost to their household budget, like an unexpected bonus almost.
Even though it reflects wider economic issues.
Right. It gives them a bit more flexibility, a small cushion, allows them to make those remittances work harder for daily needs, maybe even tiny investments.
Okay, so that adds another dimension. But here's where the story takes a turn. Because despite all this positive impact, this ingenuity, things are getting, well, complicated for Central Asian migrants.
The shifting sands part of the equation.
Exactly. Leaving for Russia, which has always been the main destination, right? It's lost some of its appeal, especially since Moscow invaded Ukraine in 2022.
Even with jobs potentially available in arms factories and such.
Even with that. Because there's this profound fear now. The fear of being sent to fight in Ukraine. Moscow's even admitted that around 20,000 Central Asian migrants who got Russian citizenship are already serving in the army.
20,000. That's not just a theoretical risk then. It's happening.
It's a terrifying reality for many.
And the human cost.
Yeah.
It's truly tragic. Tajik President Emomali Rahman spoke publicly about it. He expressed deep concern over the hundreds of repatriated coffins coming back from Russia.
Oh, wow.
Highlighting these devastating outcomes for people who, as he put it, just left to earn bread for their families. A really stark reminder of the danger.
It's heartbreaking. And on top of that fear, there's this other major issue brewing, isn't there?
Yes, the rise in anti-migrant sentiment within Russia itself, it really spiked apparently after the terrible Moscow music venue attack in 2024 when 4 Tajiks were arrested as suspects.
That horrific event had ripple effects.
Big time. Unfortunately, it led to a surge in, xenophobic violence, street harassment aimed at Central Asians, and then Moscow tightened the screws legally too. New laws making it much easier to expel migrants.
Easier to expel them? What kind of laws are we talking about? How does that actually work?
Well, things like stricter visa rules, tougher registration requirements. It's become easier for authorities to revoke residency permits or even citizenship, sometimes on pretty flimsy pretexts.
So more administrative hurdles?
Yes, and more administrative arrests, more deportations for what might have been minor issues before. For a migrant, it means living with constant uncertainty, You could be working legally, following the rules, but one small paperwork error, or just a new interpretation of a rule.
And you could be deported.
Potentially, yes, often with very little chance to appeal. It makes life incredibly stressful, unstable. It's almost like weaponizing bureaucracy against them.
That sounds incredibly precarious. And we have a concrete example of this shift, don't we? Kadyrbek Tashimbekov.
Ah, yes, the young man, 29.
That's him. He's one of, get this, 300,000 Kyrgyz nationals who left Russia between 2023 and 2024, either willingly or by force.
300,000, just from Kyrgyzstan.
Or just from Kyrgyzstan. That accounts for more than half of all the Kyrgyz migrants who were in Russia at that time. It's a huge exodus.
Wow, a massive shift in population flow.
And Kadyrbek's personal story. He was expelled after 8 years working there, 8 years building a life. Now he's back home in Batkin. And what's he doing?
He's working on a construction site, right?
Exactly. Operating a crane, literally helping build that new school his community is funding. From Moscow exile to Batkin construction worker.
His story really brings it full circle, doesn't it? That resilience we talked about.
Yeah.
He could be crushed, but he's back, contributing directly.
It's quite powerful.
And it raises that question about the future. What are the home countries doing? You mentioned Kyrgyzstan's president, Sadir Japarov, has actually pledged to encourage migrants to return.
Yeah, actively trying to bring them back.
And what's really interesting is that all three of the former migrants mentioned in the report, Abdanabiev, Akhmatov, and Tashimbekov, they all said the same thing.
What was that?
That salaries were actually growing back home and that they don't plan to go back to Russia.
No plans to return. That feels significant. Like maybe a turning point? A new chapter, perhaps?
It could be. Driven partly by the push factors from Russia, the fear, the hostility, but also maybe, just maybe, by genuinely improving opportunities at home.
That's the key question, isn't it? Are these growing salaries a real sustainable trend or just a temporary blip, and which sectors are seeing growth?
It's probably a bit mixed, There are definitely signs of real shifts. Some of it might be linked to increased economic activity within Central Asia itself. Construction services seem to be doing better.
Okay.
But there are also these deeper government efforts, trying to diversify the economies, create more jobs domestically. So maybe not a boom everywhere, but a concerted push.
And making local economies more viable alternatives.
Exactly. And for individuals like those three men, you combine slightly better pay at home with the very real dangers and stresses in Russia. Well, staying home starts to look like a much safer, more appealing option.
So, putting it all together, what does this mean for the future? Nur Akhmatov, the teacher we started with, he had this really hopeful vision.
What did he say?
He said, "We are building this," talking about the community center, "with the hope that if we have such centers, we will train them in the right professions, guide them, and maybe there will be less emigration."
Ah, so investing in local skills, local opportunities.
Yeah, trying to break that cycle of having to leave just to find work, building sustainable futures right there.
That's powerful. And it really sums up what this deep dive has shown, I think, this kind of dual nature of remittances.
How so?
Well, on one hand, they are undeniably this vital lifeline, an engine for development, impacting poverty, funding crucial projects governments maybe can't.
Absolutely critical.
But at the same time, the whole system highlights the deep vulnerabilities migrants face, how geopolitical shifts, sudden changes in policy or sentiment in the host country can just dramatically alter their lives, sometimes tragically.
A precarious balance.
It is. But through it all, you see this incredible resilience, this determination of individuals to build better futures for their families, their communities, even from thousands of miles away. And these nations are grappling with this complex balance, relying on the money, but also trying to foster growth at home.
So as we think about this immense power of remittances, billions flowing almost unseen across borders, what are the bigger lessons here? What can we draw about, say, community-driven development, about the future of global labor, how societies just adapt, to economic needs and these sudden geopolitical shocks?
Those are big questions, and they definitely resonate far beyond just Central Asia.
For sure. And for those of you studying for the UPSC exams, really think about this interplay. Economics, social development, international relations, it's all woven together here. How might this fit into Maine's answers on migration or development models or regional stability?
Good points. It connects a lot of dots.
And for everyone listening, just consider it. These individual choices, driven by necessity, by hope, sometimes by huge personal sacrifice, how they collectively end up shaping the destiny of entire nations. It's quite profound when you step back.
It really is.
So if you found this deep dive as fascinating as we did, please do make sure to like and subscribe to The Deep Dive wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, let us know what you think.
Absolutely. Leave us a comment if you have more questions or other topics you'd like us to tackle in the future. We genuinely love hearing from you. Thanks for tuning in.